All right, so we're live and we're color grading today. Color grading and color correcting. I have the project that I was working on yesterday pulled up here, and this is my adjustment layer for my color settings. But if I were to take this off, that's what it looks like. This was shot in S-Log3 on the Sony a7 IV, and that was to maximize the amount of dynamic range that I could get out of the camera, because the big thing for me is being able to see out these windows here. Now granted, as we can see in the scopes here, it's clipping a little bit, but let's figure stuff out. So I'm gonna duplicate this adjustment layer to keep muted as a baseline template. But what I'm gonna do for the one that's not muted is I'm going to reset everything. I'm also going to double check all of my clips and see which ones have instances of Lumetri on them. And I'm just going to remove them because I'm going to explain a couple of things here while I run through my color grading process. So kind of to start here, I'm going to pull up a couple of examples from DaVinci Resolve. So this is what DaVinci Resolve's color grading page looks like. I know a lot of people are scared off by the node workflow here because, as you can see in this example, or this example, or this example, actually, I think those are the same example. Yep, they are. They can get a little complicated and confusing, but what I'm going to show you is really, here's a really basic node tree, or even this one here, and there's a concept that goes on here where it can be applied to any video editor that works in layers, such as Premiere Pro, Final Cut, Vegas, you name it. So really, when you look at the node tree, sure, it looks a little bit complicated, but if we zoom in here, you can see we have a couple of nodes. These three are the only ones that are actually not muted. None of these are showing up. These look like they're for very specific things, but generally speaking, you want a node for each little change that you do. You don't want to have multiple changes on one single node. So the ones that are not muted here, they have adjustments, they have a LUT/correction, and then they have a final grade or a final balance. So we're going to take this concept and we're going to apply it to color grading and Lumetri. And if you're a Final Cut user, I'm sorry, I'm not a Final Cut user, but if you know your way around Final Cut, these concepts can be used in the same way as they will be in Lumetri. So we're us as Premiere and Final Cut users, we're working on a layer-based system, not a node-based system. So how does that differ from nodes? Well, nodes can do a lot of different things. But the way that you read them is you read them from left to right. And with layers, it's really not that different. We just read them from top to bottom. And so does your computer. So really what we have to do is rotate this 90 degrees. So this node is on your top. This is the next node or layer. This is the next one. This is the next one. So we're just working in a stack here. And we're going to take the adjustment, LUT, and final balance concept and apply that to working in Lumetri. So we've got a fresh adjustment layer here. None of these clips have any effects on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our basic correction on the adjustment layer here. And I'll explain why in a second. So we're going to change the input LUT to, because this was shot in S-Log3 S-Gamut 3 Cine, I think. I can't remember for sure, but we're gonna use this LUT, which I just got from the Sony website, and that already brings us to a pretty decent look. I mean, it's easier on the eyes than the flat color image there. And I mean, if you really wanted to, you could just deliver this as is and the client would be happy. But we're going to take this a bit, like a couple steps further. So we're going to go through and kind of eyeball some things. And we're going to be looking at the scopes over here. I'm mostly using this scope here for the majority of my corrections and grading, and then I'm using this one to make sure that the skin tones are proper. So we're going to start here, and I can already tell there's quite a bit of green in the whites here. So I'm going to go to the clip level, not on the adjustment layer. I'm going to go to the clip, and I'm just going to use the white balancing tool, and that, as you can see, fixed a lot right there. And we're going to do the same thing here. I'm honestly just going to white balance off of the wall here. And actually, maybe instead of white balance there, I'm just going to see how that works. It's a little too magenta. That looks a bit proper. And honestly, I'm just kind of eyeballing a lot of this. White balance here. Yep. As you can see, this blue and yellow line are not lined up, but as soon as we white balanced it, it's fixed. Since these two are the same clip, I'm going to just copy the settings here. And this is also the same clip as here. I just pulled it for editing purposes or for pacing purposes. So let's white balance off the wall there. Kind of eyeball it, make sure the chairs are the same color, make sure the wall is the same color, etc., etc. This one looks very warm. So I'm going to white balance off the paper, but that looks a little too cool. So I'm going to roll that back just a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll white balance off the wall here. All right, so now we're going to go back to the scopes here and just kind of go through and make sure that everything looks nice and proper. I'm not going to worry too much about the highlights up here because these generally clip when you're shooting directly towards the window and you're exposing for the interior. As you can see, like there's not a ton of detail in the windows up here. There's a little bit, but not a ton. So just gonna kind of go through and make sure that everything looks nice and proper. The next thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go back to the adjustment layer here. I'm going to go to the creative tab. And I'm just going to go through a couple of creative LUTs that I downloaded myself and see what I like. The main one that I've been using is this, let's see if I can remember which one it was. I believe it was this green push here. Yeah. And I kind of like it, but let's see what else we have to work with. Two blue, two green. That one looks okay. Two green. Doesn't fit the vibe. Doesn't fit the vibe. Way too green, way too purple. Way too green. Some of these I don't know for certain why, excuse me, why I have them. Filmic contrast looks kind of decent. Now we're starting to get into some LUTs that I downloaded from Artlist and ArtGrid. These are some 8mm film LUTs that I bought. Some of the ones that I typically use are the Kodak 2383, I think. Just because that's the I know that's the like Hollywood film look. That's the film stock that they use the most common in Hollywood. But let's keep looking here. Definitely not Joker. Lady Bird might be kind of cool. This Neon Demon 3 looks kind of interesting. Way too bright, way too bright, way too bright. That one looks kind of nice. I kind of like... I'm still going to go with the one that I've been using, which is this green push one. So this is kind of the look, the overall look that I'm going for, but I think there's a couple of changes that we can make. Namely, I want to, let's see, I'm going to keep it on this still frame here. But let's get a little wacky here. So let's go into curves and just make a really, really basic S curve. Just add a little. Let's see, are we back? Let's see, are we back? We are. All right, cool. Sorry about that. Had a bit of data warnings for the stream. So I'm gonna Control Z a couple of things because it didn't look like it made it to stream. So we're gonna come back here. We're gonna go to the curves and we're gonna make a really basic S curve without crushing the highlights too much, but I just want to create a bit of contrast. And we're gonna go back to the basic adjustment and we're gonna lift the shadows just so we can see a little bit more detail in the shadows, but then we're gonna bring the blacks down a little bit without clipping them too much. And that looks pretty solid. Next, we're gonna come to color wheels and match. And for the shadows, I'm gonna push just a touch of blue in there. And then midtones, I'm gonna warm up just a hair. And this is all about really, really, really subtle pushes and changes. We don't want to overdo things too much. I like that. All right, and then for HSL secondary, this is where this second circular scope comes in. If you look here, there's this very thin line right in between red and yellow. And that line is your skin tone line. And you want that line to be, you want your information here to be as close to that line as possible in the area of skin. And how you determine where your skin tones are, we're going to use this HSL secondary tool and we're going to click on set color. And we're just gonna drop it right on his forehead. And then we're going to hit this check mark here. We're just gonna expand these quite a bit until we have pretty much only skin showing up. And yes, I am very much aware of how horrifying this looks. Let's try not to have this expand too much into the green or the yellow. And then we're just going to denoise and blur quite a bit. Let's denoise as much as we can without destroying it. And I want to try and omit her dress a little bit. So there we go. That's pretty solid. So as you can see, our skin tones are, I mean, we've got quite a bit of other stuff outside because there's trees out there that are roughly the same color, but we are going to try and warm up and push the skin tones in the right direction a little bit here. a little bit more, add a little bit of magenta in there, just because it's kind of leaning pretty heavily towards green. If we uncheck this, skin tones look pretty natural. All right, and then from here, I really like this grade. So what we're going to do from here now is go back to the clip level. And remember what I said for the layers. So at the clip level, this is the top layer, even though you can't exactly see it in that way. But this is the top level, and then anything that happens next in the chain affects everything from top to bottom. And the bottom is your final output. So we're gonna go back to the clip layer, or the clip level, and we're gonna just double check that we can actually see all of the different details that we want. So this here is where I'm going to make sure that, you know, we can pull enough detail out of the windows as well as be able to see everything in the shadows. And you know, that's a little extreme. I'm not gonna pull too much there because I would much rather prioritize being able to see inside than being able to see outside, but it was important to me on the day, and every time I shoot, that you can still see out the windows. At least a little bit. So we're gonna raise the shadows a little bit because he is very dark back here. And you can see our color corrections at work. You just kind of want to make sure that your overall exposure stays consistent. Which just pull up shadows and bring down the blacks just a little bit. And again, just because these are the same clip.
I like it.
Now this is an example of being way too dark inside and way too bright outside. So let's really boost the shadows so we can pull back some more detail from these leaves here. And then bring down these highlights just a hair, but just because the windows are already clipped, I'm not going to worry too much about trying to maintain detail outside the windows. In fact, I'm just going to keep it as lifting the shadows just so we can see the leaves. This one, I'm gonna bring highlights down just a hair. And bring up the shadows. And then, there we go. Just because it's the same clip as before. This I think looks fine, and this one I'm just going to lift the shadows a little bit and bring down the blacks just a hair. And then I'm not going to worry too much about the windows. But largely that's just my color correction and color grading workflow in a nutshell. I really like to maintain the overall look on the day straight out of camera, because when you start pushing colors around too much, especially when you've got the 8-bit cameras, granted this is a 10-bit camera, but when you're working with 8-bit cameras, and you start pushing the colors around a lot, your image really starts to fall apart very quickly. So you want to push and accentuate what's already there versus trying to add color that was never there to begin with. You want to try and keep it as natural as possible and just kind of push the colors that already exist. Log definitely helps a lot when trying to keep a lot of detail in your shots between your shadows and your highlights, but it's not exactly necessary. There are plenty of picture profiles in your cameras that look great out of camera and give you a decent amount of dynamic range to work with without crushing it all into a logarithmic curve for your gamma. In fact, a lot of what my workflow kind of relies on is having already converted log into Rec 709 and then just kind of pushing colors from there. Like you can see here, like I boosted the shadows and crushed the blacks a little bit and applied this creative LUT, did my curves and my color wheels and the skin tone adjustments. And this was all after the log to Rec 709 conversion. Everything that I did at the clip level is before the Rec 709 conversion. And that's where you can kind of get away with like fixing a couple of things in your exposure that maybe you didn't quite get right on the day, or you need to fix them before the grade, just so that way you maintain levels of detail that get lost in your grade settings. When it comes to color grading as well, the tried and true method of the Hollywood teal and orange is a very good method to replicate, because you want to incorporate a bit of color theory into your color grade, because color theory and color grading, it's all color. and you want to make sure that it's all cohesive and looks nice. And teal and orange works very well and has worked very well consistently in Hollywood for the last who knows how long, because teal and orange are complementary colors, and orange is the closest color to skin tones. As you can see on the vector scope over here where the skin tone line is, sits right between red and yellow, and that's where orange is, and the opposite of orange is teal. So you want to add a little bit of blue or teal or cyan or whatever into stuff that's not your skin tones, like having your whites set to teal, or just a little bit of teal in there, like, or you know, you could try and just go the natural balanced route, but ultimately color grading is just creative and a creative art form in and of itself, and it's just pushing colors that are already there captured in your camera. Anyway, I hope this helped anyone who happens to be watching this after August 24th of 2023. I don't think I had any viewers this entire live stream, but I hope that this helped anyone who stumbled across this. And if you ever happen to have any questions, or you want to reach out and want to know more about a certain topic in video editing or color grading or cinematography or what have you, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And I mean, shoot me a message on either Instagram or any of my other social medias. Anyway, I'm going to end the stream here. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I'm signing off.